Welcome to this quantum security and defense presentation, Building a Quantum User Community. And thank you for being a valued member of our community. Amara Graps is a Latvian-American award-winning scientist with a PhD in physics from the University of Heidelberg. Amara has a background in astronomy and planetary science and quantum technologies with companies including Baltic Sandbox Ventures, the Planetary Science Institute, Deep Space Industries, and Global Quantum Intelligence. A prolific researcher, with experience in investment due diligence and governmental research, Amara's academic career has spanned leading academic organizations, including the National Institute of Astrophysics, Rome, Max Planck Institute for Nuclear Physics, NASA Ames Research Center, and the University of Latvia. Amara has authored various publications and reports for international clients, including the European Commission, the European Space Agency, and the European Investment Council.
This talk was written in March. When I wrote it in an outline form, and after I brainstormed and got everything down on paper and then into the computer, I realized it was probably my most impactful paper ever, even though it was still in outline form. And so it's just maybe a labor of love of 30 years or 40 years because I love building communities. So here is it's kind of empirical methods that have worked in the different communities that I've built. And I hope that some of these resonate with you. So you see the outline here, and we'll go through each of them. The way that I define ecosystem is similar to how you might build and define an ecosystem for countrywide ecosystem. Now you can break it in smaller chunks for regions or states or provinces, and that will work too. The communities idea is a little bit different in that if you're a company or a research institute and you want to build your community around you, then it's more from you to them rather than a policymaker building an ecosystem. So there's a little bit of difference there, but they share a lot of the same ideas. So, I would like to begin with why we need this. And the first reason is that if you look at the number of quantum companies, there are about 1,000 or so, or no, maybe 12 or 1,300. And half of them are less than 50 employees. And so with such small numbers, their network reach is also small. And that means that they have fewer resources to reach potential clients and employees and a user base. So what I'll follow up with is maybe catering to them, how you can build out with your small company, assuming you're less than 50 people. Now, large companies can help, and the ones who are philanthropic oriented can really help. And I have a few examples of them inside, but this is more from the smaller company perspective. So we'll start with the who. People power our community. And if you look at the talent shortage, which is frequently written about and mentioned, one good way to meet that talent shortage is by upskilling the staff inside your own organization. So there are reports that say, well, we really only are missing about 600 quantum physicists in the whole world that we need to build our companies. And that's not that much when you look at the global perspective. But you don't want to look outside your company if you can begin from inside your company first, because that will be easier for you, especially if you're small. So this is also from that World Economic Forum paper that was in the previous slide. And what I wanted to point out is that when you upskill from the employees inside your company, if you are in an IT or computer-related business, probably about half of the company is thinking about quantum. They know that it's coming and that they need to learn something about it and be prepared for it. And so this heat map probably shows you, if you look on the bottom with the, I don't know if my pointer, can you see my pointer? Maybe. So this is the information and technology services. Yeah, great, thanks. And it goes on this column here, and this across is quantum and encryption here. So the highest percentage of people who think you need to upscale are in this domain of an IT company. And then alongside here, you have other technology services and trends where this here is the government and public sector. Here is energy technology. Those are like a quarter of your company think you need to know about quantum. Insurance, pensions, all the way over here is telecommunications. That's almost 30%. So I think this heat map is quite useful to understand who are thinking about upskilling and how your company might be prepared for the future. Okay, next slide. And along the way, I just want to put a plug in for women at sea level because there has been some papers that have shown that companies that have a few women at the top level, while you're building your workforce, also help you be more profitable. And I think one reason for that might be is they definitely have their view on the bottom line, but they're also community oriented in their perspectives that could help you in building your ecosystem and find those niches that will serve the community and bring more clients to you. So I want to tell you first about the 3 communities to engage. And I found out about these 3 in a funny way. And this is a little story I'm going to tell you. So the 3 are first the STEM educated public. So you might consider them let's say undergraduate level university with some engineering or physics or something, maybe first year college where they have that kind of understanding. They know calculus and trigonometry and some engineering ideas. And then there's professionals who are higher up, but not necessarily in quantum. In fact, not in quantum. Maybe there's some other IT or some other physics or engineering field, some deep tech. And then there are the experts in quantum technology. So those are the 3 communities that I'm going to be suggesting that you engage. Okay, so I found out about these through Wikipedia. And the way I found out about it was when I was analyzing the optimization landscape and looking at D-Wave's influence in that area. And you probably know that when it first arrived on the scene in 2015, it had a close relationship with Google AI. And they were making very loud noises, and the hype began to be quite high. And what I noticed when I read these press releases, understanding what it was that they were promoting is we know quantum annealing is their area of their quantum computer. It's not a universal quantum computer, it's a special one. And so when they made their announcements, if you look at the Wikipedia entry for quantum annealing, there was a spike right around those announcements, exactly on the days. And you can find out the statistics. It's open. You go into the page views analysis in the bottom of any Wikipedia page, and you can see how many accesses to that entry. And it's a really good way to see if your community are getting you. And what happened with D-Wave is that about the month of this announcement, they started putting out videos that explained what quantum annealing was. But it seemed it wasn't getting out enough because many people went to Wikipedia to try to understand this concept. So on this day, right around these press release announcements, there were 9,000 accesses above average to understand what what quantum annealing was. So I call this the educated public because Wikipedia is kind of like that. So then there's Scott Aronson's blog, and he's this curmudgeonly guy who has a very smart group of IT and physics people reading his blog, and he's been analyzing D-wave and quantum annealers since then, way back. And he was quite critical. Now he's a bit of a convert, but not necessarily to quantum annealers. He loves photonic quantum computers, by the way, a lot. But his group of colleagues were analyzing D-Wave's announcements, and D-Wave themselves would enter the conversation of his blog. They would answer a question, but not very completely, and then they would leave. It's like they're intimidated a little bit by Scott. And so what I understood from watching their conversations is that they weren't engaging as well as they could. And Scott Aronson's colleagues were really frustrated, and they started, they even came up with a benchmark for D-Wave, because it was expensive and not user ready. And if you have a group of frustrated deep tech people making benchmarks for your expensive quantum computer, you need to do a better job engaging your community, because that wasn't good advertising for D-Wave when this came about. So I'd say that D-Wave was a little bit late with engaging this deep tech community. So fast forward 10 years. This February, we had another announcement, and this time it's from Microsoft, and it's about the topological quantum computer that they've been working on for years and years. And the last time they made an announcement, they had to retract a paper because there was a claim that they made that wasn't substantiated. And it wasn't that their science was bad, but they needed to justify their claim stronger. So this year, when they made that claim, the people who were familiar with the previous time looked at those aspects of their claim, and they were not satisfied. And they started pushing back, I would say, on Microsoft. And so what we find is another group of people who went to Wikipedia to understand Majorana fermions. So I would say this is a little bit more educated than STEM educated public, probably professionals, but not in quantum technology, because they went to Wikipedia. But this is a huge community, 30,000 times above average accesses to this entry. And so these are the people you want to reach. These are people who are curious. They want to find out. There's a lot of them. And I think if you can get them as allies, that could do a lot to build your community. So keep this in mind. And if you're wondering about your community, go to Wikipedia and page view accesses and see the numbers, and you'll see what I mean. So about the experts in quantum technology after this Microsoft announcement. So the experts pushed back. They found that those particular claims from the last time this was announced were not answered. And they wrote to Nature, they wrote publicly to ARXIV, and they were getting loud. There's 30,000 or more of them. And so there was a special meeting at the APS March meeting where the head from Microsoft had the floor for about 30 minutes to talk about their claims and to answer questions. So it was March 18th. It was a full auditorium from the pictures that I saw. And they did a long explanation of their result, but they left time for only 2 questions. So I think that's a lost opportunity. If people are wanting answers and they were ready with their questions and you only have time at the end for answering 2 of them, you're going to leave a lot of those people frustrated. So my suggestion, if you have this in any company in the future where people are the experts say, well, you didn't answer this. What you're doing is putting out the fire. You really don't want to be in that position, but it's better to give yourself time to answer the questions in all public forum. And so I think it would have been better for Microsoft to cut their talk in half and use the other half to just answer questions. So what we see from the public pushback was that the experts do want to support great science. They were not critical in a, nasty way or mean way. They genuinely wanted to understand. And that's the premise to start with, is there's a lot of deep tech people out there who are curious. They want to try out your new device. And if you start your assumption with allocating funds that there are people out there who want to understand and support you, then maybe it'll be easier to allocate resources so you can answer the critics. So let's talk about, now that we have those three communities, bridges to those three communities. And these human bridges, I call them information conduits. Essentially, you're connecting silos, academics, industry liaisons, educators. And now I'm going to show a lot of examples of human bridges. So one human bridge is the one from universities or community colleges to industry, or industry to universities working together. And the way that these can support your building the community is one, you have those experts from your industry building standards in the technology as the technology is being developed. And I'll follow up with an example shortly. The other is to just find new employees. And that ecosystem is really important for that. And another bridge, and I'll also show examples of this, is the bridge from companies to your community to help you educate your community about your quantum technology. And one really good way is hackathons and to sponsor hackathons. So if you're looking for an activity you can do that's not too expensive and you want to get your ideas out there and start growing people around you, hackathons is a really good way, especially, aimed towards high school, community colleges, and internships. So here's two. One is a hackathon and one is standards. So on the left, one of my favorite communicators, Sierra, she works for Quantum Insider now, and she's promoting a Future Leaders in Quantum virtual hackathon event that's coming up. I think it is in about a month. I saw this a couple weeks ago. And so Sierra is genuinely one of the best storytellers out there, and she knows about building communities. Before she was hired by Quantum Insider, she ran her own company with a daily qubit. That was really amazing, and she built a community from that, and then they grabbed her because she's so good. So hackathons is always a good way. Now on the right, I have the telecommunication standardization sector of ITU. And already 3 years ago, they were putting in standards for KQD and quantum drones. And I learned about this because a fellow from South Korea gave a talk to Inside Quantum Technology, and his talk was so good. It was all about quantum drones, in fact, that I looked him up and then I made contact with him. And I saw that he was on the board of the ITU to develop standards. And so if you want to grow a new field and get more people involved, you develop standards or you be on committees to develop standards. So his name is Hans Kim, and KT is or was the company that he works for. I actually don't know what he's doing in the last couple years because there's a popular singer named Hans Kim. And when I Googled him, I keep getting the popular singer. And so I have to like track him down again because he was such a good speaker. And his particular use case that was inside of the standards of the ITU was a quantum drone use case for monitoring and developing communication right on the DMZ zone with North Korea. And for everyone who has hostile neighbors, this is a really nice use case. And I'm completely open to people who are interested in talking about quantum drones with me because I live in Latvia and we have a drone wall that goes from Finland all the way through Poland. And so we have already a strong base of drone users who are learning from Ukraine, who are the best. And anytime you add quantum technology to a technology, um, it's an innovation that ramps it up. And we know that innovation saves lives. And so that's why I think quantum drones is something we need to be doing when we're next to hostile neighbors. So anyway, this is what Hans Kim was suggesting. And I'm going to talk a little more about quantum drones later, I think. I forget where it is in the talk. But now I want to go from venture capitals to universities. So there's several bridges, human bridges there. And I learned about this one VC who was developing a really good bridge to university students. And I'll show her slide next. And then there's bridges from quantum companies to deep tech communities as your beta testers. I'll show you an example there. And then the bridges of experts of STEM educated public to moderate panels. And I'm going to give the example of me because I did that once. And it was fun for a lot of reasons. And then partnerships because quantum is in a very special position in between high performance computing and AI. And the partnerships that we can build with those communities are really strong. Okay, so here is a woman. Her name is Natalia Olsen Urtejo. She is still at a VC company, but she's also a consultant doing several things. And in 2023, she was on a panel, EIT Grow Digital, and she was on the panel with Jan Gertz of IQM. And the panel was making tech startups investable. And in her perspective, what she did in her company was develop 55 partnerships with universities around the world, where the universities were her champions, looking out for cool tech and cool people to put in her VC toolbox. And what she did is she used the students. I don't know the details of how the students were engaged, but that was her conduit. The students would tell her about the professors who were teaching this, and then she would get in contact with the students and professors and learn about great deep tech ideas and projects through those students. So I thought this was a very smart bridge. Now, beta testers, deep tech people, if you're a quantum company, can be your beta testers. And so one of my favorite quantum companies is Orange Quantum. They have a product and a service that tests qubits, especially superconducting quantum computer qubits. And they have now um, a, a big system that they call Orange Juice because they're Orange Quantum. Now they have Orange Juice. And this group of beta testers, there's 5 companies that are beta testing their Orange Juice, is is a way to grow a community. So these testers are also in quantum, but they don't necessarily have to be. You know, if you have a platform, let's say you have a cloud platform and it's accessing quantum computers or some other service, and you want to have deep tech people test it out, this is a great way to begin to grow your community. And so Orange Quantum is they just started this, I think last month, March, I believe, and they're going to be in their beta testing mode through the summer. Okay, now we get to moderating a panel, and this was 2 years ago. I can't believe it was 2 years ago. You know, it seems like it was only last year. Okay, it was longer ago than I thought. And I was asked by the RigaCom organizers. This is an IT um, convention. It's pretty big in the Baltic area and beyond. It's all about communication and IT. And for the first time, they had a quantum technology panel. And they learned about me. I don't know how. And I decided, why not use it to learn how to do this? Because one, you have to answer the why for yourself. Why am I in this field? Two, is if you view yourself as a bridge to the deep tech community, you can sharpen your arguments for communication, if they're in your audience. And so we had 30 minutes to talk to this audience, and I had three people on my panel. One was at Accenture. At the time, Accenture had 100 quantum technology workers. Now, this was almost 2 years, was 2 years ago, so a year and a half. I think they probably have double that if I were to guess. And Zane left and is doing something different now, so I can't ask her details. Accenture is this consultant company that is a bit of a black box. You don't really know what's going on inside unless you talk to the people at the company. So if there are Accenture employees out there, I'd love to talk to you to find out what you're doing now, because I think Accenture is a great company. And then Ava is an AI um, CEO, and she was one of those AI bridge people. She was using AI to quantum to build a customer base in a very efficient way, and that's what her service is. And then there's a researcher from University of Latvia who was using optimizing quantum computers like D-Wave quantum computers. So they were there, and we had a good trainer, and I trained myself. I wanted to know why my audience should care about quantum technology. So it's back to basics. And I would say that what I put together to lead this panel is still usable. And I have this at LinkedIn. People can go and read more if you're in the same position as me. You're leading a panel. Uh, I think these ideas are pretty strong. So quantum is interdisciplinary. We're in a position where we still have early adopters. Why you can stake your niche. You want more use cases now to show how quantum computers can help you. Emphasize the time frame. So a year and a half ago, we had to be careful about saying when quantum computers will be available. And I think now we know now when the tipping point will be. And I would say it's more like 3 years, 2 years. It's if you say 5 to 10 years, I think that's a little late. I think 3 years, people are going to be more familiar with them, and they'll be more daily conversation kind of talk. That's my tipping point prediction. And so the panel that was put together by RigaCom is proof that there's really good communication between academia and industry in Latvia. All right. And so we were trained. We had a coach, a 1 hour coaching session who trained us 3 days before the RigaCom. And there was like part one, you prepare the audience. And so how do you prepare the audience? Well, you have to tell a joke or loosen them up or like icebreakers or something like that. And well, I have gray hair and I'm not exactly corporate looking. And so what I thought is, well, what about an icebreaker to say that we have a technology that you don't understand until you can explain it to your grandmother, right? There's this joke, like you can't, or your mother or your grandmother, right? It's a little bit like not so nice about women, but it's kind of a joke that maybe they don't know as much about technology as other women, but we know that's not true. And I wanted to like put a spin on that and say, well, I'm like your grandmother explaining to you, right? And so it actually, I used it. My teenage daughter said, you have to use this. And I did, and it got a laugh from the audience. So, there is training and jokes that you can use to prepare your audience. Okay. And then what I should have done during the panel is have this on the background, because people are familiar with classical computing. They're not familiar with quantum computing. And I think any comparison of the two when you're explaining to the community is really helpful. All right, so let's go on with other human bridges. So another is partnerships with the AI and the high performance computing community. Those are really important and really helpful. And so here is a slide I prepared for the Lithuanian Ministry of Economy. You know, I was talking about where the business niches would be. And definitely high performance computing is a really good niche. And so this was last year when I spoke with them. And I used a report that IQM and Atos prepared. This was now 2021. They said by 2023, 76% of HPC centers will be using quantum technology. That was optimistic. This report is from 2021. You know, I would like their assessment, what they think today, because I don't think even in 2025, 76% of HPC centers are using quantum technology. I would say maybe it's more like 40% or something like that. So, but you're finding more integration of quantum with other supercomputers, co-located, they're on-premise. So partnerships with the HPC community is really helpful. Okay, another is AI. So Shahin Khan in December 2023 gave a wonderful presentation that talked about this HPC area of a bridge between quantum and AI and HPC. And he has this quote that I like a lot where he says, consider AI as an HPC application and quantum computing as an HPC library call. Now, you've heard this AI bridge where people are talking about quantum for AI and AI for quantum. And this year, they're almost equal in the number of applications that we're seeing in press releases. So when Shahin Khan made this announcement at his talk in December 2023, it was a little bit one-sided. You know, I would say AI for quantum is equal in applications as quantum for AI. But it's the more you understand about this this overlap between these fields, I think the more you'll have partnerships and more customers because AI can boost the quantum field as it's developing its applications further. Okay, more bridges. So another bridge is the experts to the STEM educated public, and that is via online community platforms that are hardware agnostic, meaning it's not catering to one modality, you know, whether photonic or superconducting or ion trap or, you know, so I'll show you a really nice example for that next. And then that other two parts are about venture capitalists performing due diligence. These are human bridges to helping grow the community. You want to have quantum technology knowledgeable people involved in the process and not just looking at your business plan. You want actually a little understanding about how the field has been developing. And then another human bridge is from large companies to local universities to fund research. So when I gave that panel moderation, I had this Accenture employee on my panel, and she pointed out a really nice funding source that I hadn't thought of before, which is that large entities like Accenture and Capgemini, they have internal funding, and you can gain that funding faster than European Commission or some other national funder. You know, usually in a matter of a month or two, the funding comes through, you know, rather than 6 months or so for European Commission or even longer in some of these other methods. So pay attention to these large entities. They have quantum now, and if you can be a stakeholder in their activity. Let's say you work at a university and you're doing peer research and they can use your peer research. That's a perfect bridge. Okay, so here is an example of an online forum that I tend to think now was a little before its time, because if it was existing now, it would be a lot more successful. So in 2016, D-Wave and One Qubit, which are both Vancouver, well, they're near Vancouver, they're Canadian companies. One Qubit is an algorithm company that started by building applications and algorithms to use D-Wave computers. And then as they developed, they became agnostic, not only D-Wave, but other gate-based computers. And so in 2016, they started this online forum they called Quantum for Quants. And it was pretty popular. A community was formed, and it didn't steer you only to D-Wave. You could ask any kind of optimization question. It had a organic growth. It was a supported place to talk, have questions be answered. It looked like this. So it was really lovely to see. And if you go to Wayback Machine, you can find it online and see the active conversations that were there. And if you want to promote your company, I would say start Quantum for Quants, because it doesn't exist now and we need it, and if, let's say I know there's a community for climate change, but I don't think there's a forum. And I think people who are working on sustainable energy and climate change problems could use Quantum for Climate. I think there is a group like that, but their forum is not populated. They just have a group and they're not actively building it up and using it. So in 2021, it stopped. What happened is that D-Wave and One Qubit really didn't have the staff to continue it, and they had to let it go, unfortunately. The lessons learned, I talked with a One Qubit employee. He said that the growth was a little too slow by those two companies, and because the growth wasn't fast enough, they decided to shut it down. And so for future people who have the resources and want a way to build your user community, I think the return of investment is really high for something like this. One reason is you're talking with your community, not at your community. D-Wave has a bit of a attitude with talking at their community. When you attend their seminars, it's a bit, it's like they're removed from you, and you want not to do that. If you have people you want to grow with you as you grow your service or product, there's a more give and take, I think, that is helpful. And so the people in such forum can advocate and be beta testers to help you give feedback to whatever services or products you are developing. And then you can informally introduce new tech, which reduces the hype. You know what works when you want to explain that. And then the communities and deep tech people can grow together and support each other in times of change. So that's about such platforms. Now we'll go to another human bridge, which is VCs performing due diligence. This is just a note that venture capital companies, they don't always have quantum technology knowledgeable people involved in the process. I got involved with analyzing quantum tech through Baltic Sandbox, which was local and small, based in Tallinn and Vilnius, so Estonia and Lithuania. And now they've expanded. They're growing quite a bit. They're deep tech people. And I'm still their go-to quantum technology person. So I really like that. And I gained my experience with them. And then I have more experience with European Commission now. Now, consultancy firms need them too. So if you read Deloitte and McKinsey reports, they're nice. And they do have quantum knowledgeable people, but I would suggest they could use more, because I think some of their projections are a little bit off. They have still a little bit of hype, maybe their timeline are either too short or too long. I think if you're a physicist in quantum, these could be potential jobs for you. See if they need your your expertise. So, okay, let's go on. And then I talked about internal funding available from large entities like Accenture and Capgemini. I really think they're good sources. I talked with Capgemini people, in fact, and I offered to write stories for them. And they said, "Oh, Omar, we have our own story writers, internal to the company." And Accenture told me that too. So okay, they don't need my story writing help, but maybe they'll change their mind. I don't know. So um, more human bridges. So I call myself a triple or quadruple helix communicator. And these are people who move fluidly between business, research education, and policy society. And in a small country like our Baltic countries, one of the things I love is the ministries are easily accessible. You can, you know, make an appointment with one of those members of Ministry of Education or Ministry of Economy, and you know enough people between you and them that you can, probably get an appointment in a week or two. And, so policy people are very interested in what the public needs. And if you're on the ground, as a public educated person, they're interested to talk to you because deep tech is an economic fast grow driver for governments. So they do want to listen to you. And venture capitalists are also with their ear to the ground. They're like between the banks and the public. And so they're also very good listeners. So I would say policy people are good listeners, VCs are good listeners. And if you can get conversations with these groups of people, it's helpful for the community and growing your user base. Okay, I forget what comes next. So I'll go back up a little bit. About a month ago, there was a wonderful seminar by a Vodafone fellow, and I was so enraptured with his talk that I'm going to show some slides of his conclusions. And I don't know what I liked better, so I'm going to show a bunch of them because he is exactly the right kind of person, as a large company that can boost in many ways the quantum in your local community, in your country, and internationally. And his perspective is really valuable. So that was his presentation, and these are some of those slides from his presentation that was brilliant. So he talked about all the opportunities that quantum provides, and they have a strategy for that. They have a reskilling program within the company. Um, and I mean, it's really a detailed reskilling program. And they can answer the why to anybody, whether it's the local city, local country, or internationally. They believe passionately in the value of quantum technologies. And if you have a link to someone like this, it's helpful for you as well. So that seminar, I believe, is in the QSecDef group. And if you haven't seen it yet, I really recommend it. It's fantastic. And so here's a couple more screen snapshots of his presentation. And then I'll put one at the end that when I talk about the country UK-wide ecosystem that he's helping to grow, that's a nice slide as well. Okay, so we did who, and now quickly go through when, and then there'll be a what. And we are approaching an almost an hour, well, maybe 50 minutes. So maybe before we get to what, we'll take a 5-minute break. So now here's the when. So here's the problem with these small companies, and that is that deep tech startups have limited financial resources. They have to do a number of things at the same time. They need to show promise to the investors, and they don't want to oversell those promises because then they're in trouble. For example, some of you might have seen the Tipping Point Time magazine cover in December 2022, where IBM was featured. There was a walkthrough to New York site by the journalist of Time magazine, and IBM was saying that quantum computers can solve climate change, they can solve cancer, they can do all these things. I mean, I took that magazine article and it's all redlined. I hated that article. And the main reason was simply they didn't have a timeline involved. Now, if you're a business and you're funded by venture capitalists, they're going to be looking at articles like that and have expectations. So it's bad for other companies too, because you can't deliver on a timeline, that's not mentioned, because people will expect all these society problems to be solved next year, and it's really terrible for the community. So you have to have a timeline. So, so that's the fine line. You want to be positive, optimistic, but you don't want to oversell your promises. So that's the fine line. And we saw what happened with Microsoft. They had a fire to put out in March of this year, and it would have been better for them to answer the questions of the critics rather than maybe talk over them or talk to them. It would have been better to talk with them, because the experts who ask those questions, they do want to support you and support great science, because quantum's cool and deep tech love it, and so do the quantum experts. So here's about timing. As you grow, you do want to simultaneously educate your quantum community as you're growing. And this talk is all about ways to do that. And hopefully a few of them are cheap enough for you. And here's some other suggestions for you, which is a newsletter, which is the usual way. Sometimes it's a quarterly newsletter. I suggest maybe even a monthly newsletter. Webinar channels, social media, LinkedIn is pretty good. If you don't have a LinkedIn presence, you need to start it now. And then I see more and more with Slack and Discord and AMA channels, like Pascal has those, the French company, and I haven't actually jumped in one of those, but there's a Quantum Biology Institute in Los Angeles who has a Discord channel that I thought, wow, okay, they're like in this century, they're trying to reach as many people as possible. So there's a number of ways to do that. And podcasts also, I think I don't have that, maybe include that in webinar channel here. So now we are at the what, and it's at the hour. So do you want to why don't I answer questions right now, and then, take a 5-minute break so I can drink some water, and then we'll go on the what, because we're at about halfway through my slides. And I think this is a good pausing point. Okay. Questions by anybody?
If there are no questions, we can just go to the break, Amara, and just come straight back in 5.
Okay. Okay. So let's do 5 minutes right now. So maybe, 3 minutes after the hour, right? Make some tea or drink some water or something and come back in 5 minutes. All right?
Cup of tea. Okay,
Okay.
cool.
All right. Okay, are there any questions? Not yet.
You've wowed everyone, Amara, I think.
Okay. Should I go on?
Yeah, let's go through.
Okay. Okay. All right. So I've indicated and hinted of what to build, what to do, but this is a little more focused on those particular tasks. So we know that we're in an area where it's beyond quantum 1.0, of decades ago. We're in quantum 2.0, where we're actively manipulating quantum states and effects, quantum computers, quantum sensors, everything. And so what to do to build your community? There was a fantastic presentation by William Hurley at the Q2B 2024 Silicon Valley meeting, and he called it the power of a billion minds. And so he presented a number of ideas where there are a few quantum physicists who have certain needs. They want your quantum computer to be easy to use, or they in order to use your device, they have their needs. And then there's the society needs. And these few scientists need to serve society in order to make their business grow, have an impact. And so he suggested that the problems to work on for quantum companies would be most efficiently addressing society if they use the challenges that society cares most about, like climate, disease, energy, food. And so it's really a compelling presentation. And if you haven't seen it, I suggest you watch it, because I was inspired and it made sense. And I love these society challenges, and how can we serve those challenges with technology. So these are screen snapshots from his presentation. And he talks about how the funding is not as much as we would like. And there's a bit of a mismatch between the science that we need to make these devices usable and the business where they can earn money. And so he said that if you do focus on these society-wide challenges, you'll more efficiently grow your business. He says that these challenges are, science, and quantum is science, and this is a way to have the out of sync be in sync. All right, so that's his presentation. And along those same lines, if you are needing to grow your user community or your ecosystem, let's say you're in a tiny Baltic country and you are at ground zero of building your ecosystem, the best way is to just start building something. Even if it's a pilot or proof of concept, you need to start somewhere. And in fact, if you look at a lot of the funded projects nowadays by the European Commission, many of them are pilot or proof of concept projects. And in my opinion, that's okay. I know that's been criticized a little bit, like we need something that's really in industry usable, but proof of concept is fine to start. So one of my favorite quantum technology companies is communication company QNECT. And it has a CTO, Mel Flement. This is a New York company. And every time this company posts something on LinkedIn, I'm always there because they have a very community-oriented perspective, and they grew their company by serving the community in a philosophical way. They wanted to build a network in the New York, Brooklyn area, and then they grew from there. So I talked about quantum drones with the South Korea fellow who wrote the standards in the ITU standardization, and I'm going to show a little bit more about that. And then the other idea is that if your community doesn't have exactly a lot of quantum yet, a way to grow it is you build a bridge with the deep tech that you have, of which some of that can help a quantum technology service or product, and you communicate what the outside world is doing for that service or product in order so they can see the possibilities. Because if you're a small community, you don't see sometimes the quantum possibilities, and you need to show examples of what you can do. And then when your local community starts building your quantum technology, then you communicate those successes. That's I think a strategy that would be helpful for tiny countries like our Baltic countries. So here's that fellow from QNect. He's the either the CEO or the CTO. And one thing about Male Flament is that he had a different kind of sponsorship to grow his company. It was a fund that was, excuse me, better than a postdoc, way better than a postdoc. I mean, he really got support and feedback. It's called Activate. And if you look up Activate, this particular fund, it really looks helpful and nice for deep tech and people getting into quantum technology. But it's US based. So if you're in that position, check it out. It seems like a very useful support for growing your company. And here's another Male Flament presentation on LinkedIn where he was describing how their company grew because they wanted to serve their community. Quantum internet requires a village, and then he talks about that particular village and all of the stakeholders and the successes. And so let's go on. Now, quantum drones is a bootstrap idea. The pilot that Hans Kim talked about already successfully ran 5 years ago in South Korea, but we don't see it very often in other places. And so I got in touch with QSecDef because I saw that they were talking about quantum drones a little bit, just a little bit. One of their presentations had this graph that showed quantum drones as one of the communication, the networking of the QKD technology. And so if there are listeners out there who are interested in this topic, I really want to build a quantum drone project sooner rather than later. And the reason is because we have a baseline in our eastern flank countries. This is Finland, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Poland, that I think would really support augmenting a drone with quantum technology. So we all know what drones are, and it's a huge topic of defense where I live. It's probably half of the defense that we're building. So we know that QKD is the easiest quantum to implement. And what Hans Kim did in South Korea was he developed a way to transfer communication information using drones, but it essentially stored the key. It was not a full transporting the entanglement way of a communication network, but it did very strongly encrypt the data and preserve that data, and so that it wasn't interfered with. And so that's his use case right near the DMZ zone. And if anyone knows more about this, I'd like to know follow-up about this, because I only have the information from him from a few years ago. All right, so this is a graphic that's in the ITU standards, as well as what he presented to Inside Quantum Technology way back is either 2021 or 2022. So I'm just taking it from him. So the Chinese are also doing this. And I would say Asia in general are some years ahead of the West in implementing this kind of technology. So, oops, I skipped a page, didn't I? Yeah, and the few words about existing drone development. So here we have an example of of every month there's some new announcement, new funding, a new technology development. I mean, I put together this list a year ago, and now it's already 3 times as long. I kind of track about all the drone development in our 5 countries, and it's crazy big. So with this kind of baseline, we are ready for a quantum technology augmentation. So talk to me if you have an idea for developing it where I live. And this is from presentation of American students and postdocs who had 2 automobiles. They weren't drones, but they had QKD that they were transmitting between the 2 cars as they were racing through the fields in the Midwest, I think it was, in the United States, and successful. And they have complete presentations of every detail of how they implemented and built this. And so if you have people who are already building it, you can learn from them. You know, it's not plagiarism if you're learning from them, and then you can, you know, go on and develop it further for growing your community. Okay, so that's how to bootstrap from existing technology. So I want to give an example of when you're close to policy and you need to build a roadmap. We have a lot of quantum technology roadmap builders now because countries all over the world have funding to fund quantum technology. And so the roadmap is the next step, is implementing that technology. So I want to give an example of what's called science knowledge gaps. And it comes from a field I was in 10 years ago that it didn't go farther for several reasons, but there are a lot of lessons there, and I'll tell you exactly what happened. So this is the asteroid mining field, and the problem 10 years ago is that there are the engineers who are building space missions, but they're not asteroid specialists, and asteroid scientists are expensive, like any researcher, and so they didn't have the funds to have the latest asteroid science, but they had the questions. So what if you help them out because they weren't going away? You know, the asteroid scientists thought that these asteroid mining companies were a little bit goofy when they first appeared around 2012 or 2013. And they thought, oh, well, you know, they're going to go away. Well, they didn't go away. You know, they kept growing. And so, you know, for asteroid scientists who are struggling to like fund themselves, like, oh, maybe these companies can offer me a job. Well, they're kind of expensive, but you can build your networking with them and grow and help them grow. So what we did is there are, let's say, 500 to 800 asteroid scientists in the world, and there were at that time 3 asteroid mining companies. And so a friend of mine and I went to these companies and asked what were their leading asteroid science questions. And they had a list. And then we took that list to the asteroid scientists and asked, can they answer these questions? And then we put it in a shared Google Docs. And a bunch of collaborators jumped in and answered it. I think 50 different scientists, or maybe not that much, maybe 30 or 40. And so this is the strategy. So they answered the questions, and you could see from the answers what were the hard, challenging problems. And those we would call science knowledge gaps. And science knowledge gaps are like the nodes along the roadmap. Like it focuses your attention. What do you have to solve to build this technology in your community? So science knowledge gaps are really important. So the answers give you SKGs, and that builds out a roadmap. So this was the first iteration. This is ASME stands for Asteroid Science Intersections with Mine Engineering. And this is the white paper from all these asteroid scientists answering the questions from the mining companies. And it was, and that's our roadmap, essentially. The SKGs are inside of that. Then you take those SKGs and you talk to each other, like what are the most important? You have to decide, where do you begin with your roadmap? And at this time, we decided that answering the composition of asteroids, and particular the water composition, because water is both a propulsion, like fuel, as well as it can provide assistance to astronauts, or it can build out resources, maybe underground your asteroid. Or there's a lot of uses of water. Water is very helpful if you have a sustainable space project. And so that became the next version of this project. And the Luxembourg Ministry of the Economy was funding this. And then along the way, they became the Luxembourg Space Agency. So they started with asteroid mining, Luxembourg did. And then what happened in 2018 is two of the mining companies went out of business. And Luxembourg had an investment, a 10 million euro investment in one of them, and it hurt. And they decided to pivot sideways to lunar mining. So Luxembourg is still doing sustainable space and mining, but they're focusing on the moon right now. And asteroid mining is just kind of sitting. Every once in a while they have, conferences, and there's a few asteroid miners there, but it's really not growing. But that's what you do when you don't have enough money to pay the scientists. You're a little bit strapped. You have this really cool idea, and the scientists want to help you. So if you're in this position, find a way to involve those scientists. I mean, eventually you want to pay them, right? You really do want to pay them. But if it's a really cool idea, you'll get some people volunteering their advice, and their names are there. Their names are on these white papers. That's really good advertisement for these scientists. So there's two ARXIV white papers that came out of this experience. Okay, and the reason I wanted to include this is there was an announcement yesterday, a really cool announcement. You may have heard that IonQ just acquired Capella Space. Well, Capella Space was one of the customers of Deep Space Industries, which it used to be an asteroid mining company, and then it was acquired by Bradford Space. And Bradford Space took the whole line of the water thrusters that was part of Deep Space Industries product line. Well, Capella Space has some of these water thrusters, so I thought it was an extra cool, merging of my present and past to have Capella Space now be acquired by IonQ. All right, let's go on. Use case examples. So the more use case examples you can provide to your community, those 3 communities that I talked about, the better. You want to show how it's usable and way beyond PR language, because PR language may be helpful a little bit to the investors or the policymakers, but it's not going to convince your deep tech community. You need real examples. So a year ago, around this time, I read 500 quantum classical research papers. I didn't read each one line by line, but I digested it, I call it. And I had a strategy of digesting these that use spacecraft data processing. When you get data from spacecraft, there's level 0, which is the most raw form, and then all the way to the most processed where you interpret it and get a real result that's useful. That's level 3. So I had my spacecraft processing ideas, digesting these 500 classical quantum research papers. And some great things came out of it. I told myself I would stop reading these papers when I could see trends, when I could see themes, and when I had some outcomes that you could talk about hybrid quantum classical computing. But I didn't know that it would be 500 papers. I thought I would read 50 papers and then have those trends, but I needed to read more. It was quite a challenging task. So I use some of the AI tools a little bit, but at the end I had level 0 spreadsheet and level 3 spreadsheet, and I still build out my spreadsheet. Level 3 has about 150 use cases that I look at every once in a while, and that's what I like to build stories around. Another outcome of this project is that if you query a research paper with an AI tool, and you say, what is its key contribution? AI tools are pretty good. It'll give you something that looks a little bit like a KPI, like a key performance indicator. And if you have a bunch of those papers, and then you organize it in a timeline of dates, you can actually use those pseudo KPIs to see progress. I'm always looking at progress. How is this field evolving? And so you can see like 2021, the KPIs of superconducting quantum computers working on medical health, for example, and see how they're getting more real and more real over time. And same thing goes with other modalities. So AI is useful, but maybe not in the way that you are using it normally. I think writers use it a lot and they have this structure and probably see it a lot. But I use AI in a little bit different way. Another outcome of this project was I have survey papers, and I didn't have a slide to show you, but talk to me. I have a list now, it's about 5 pages of survey papers of all these different areas and themes and modalities of quantum classical hybrid quantum computing. So if you're a newcomer in the field and you want to say, okay, I want to learn this, where do I start? Start with a survey paper. And I have like now survey of survey papers that I think is helpful for introducing people to this field. And so you know that hybrid classical quantum computing is probably half of the quantum technology funding and field. And this is what's called a influence flower. If you go to ARXIV, it has these extra tools in the bottom of any of those papers, and you can generate these influence flowers. And this paper by Presco is the most referenced quantum technology paper ever. And the influence flower is beautiful. I just really love how it shows the to and from all these different fields to the NISC area. 3,121 citations when I did this. It might be more now. It actually might be 4,000 now. So NISC is noisy intermediate scale quantum, and it's usable today. You know, I know that it has pushback by people say, well, it's not, you know, too noisy and it's not giving, it actually is giving useful results today. So it's worth to go a little bit deeper. And my spacecraft data processing approach looks like this. I don't think I'll go into detail here, but what I did is I collected the papers from a variety of sources, just straight from ARXIV, or I filtered it with some keywords. You know, if you use hybrid as a keyword to filter from ARXIV, it doesn't work anymore because all quantum computing nowadays is hybrid. And so you have to actually you have to put in some AI keywords or some other keywords. I still don't know the best keywords now to get all the hybrid papers. A year ago when I was collecting them, there were 1 new publication a day, and I was really overwhelmed. And now I don't have the right set of keywords to get it. I know it's more than 1 a day. And Steve is probably more familiar because he's in ARXIV every day and he's pulling out papers. And so I need a better way to get the level 0. But one way is LinkedIn. You know, the company scientists, they post there, say, we just published this paper, and you know, and if you have a really good network at LinkedIn, you can pick those up that way. So that's another way to pick up these papers. Okay. And some of the trends from a year ago, when I decided I could see trends. These may be obvious now, actually. You know, I think they're a little bit obvious, but I'll tell you what they are. So you know that hybrid quantum classical computing is being integrated with HPCs all the time now, and that machine learning AI is also a big part. Now, when I did this project, my biggest confusion was where does AI fit in? Because honestly, I didn't understand. I didn't understand how it's used to help devices, you know, shape the pulse that's measuring the qubit or all these different ways. I didn't see enough like implementations. How does that work when AI makes the quantum computer more efficient? Or how does it work that quantum makes AI more efficient? And now I think I understand it much better. And it's equal quantum for AI and AI for quantum applications now. Now, because we only have 50 to 100 qubits actively being used in hardware use cases, there are many, many algorithm methods to relax your hardware constraints so that you get a lot more out of those qubits. And one way is that there are algorithms, you know, these optimization approaches to using hybrid computers that have particular problems to solve, and you have to match your algorithm to the device. And Hamiltonian, so if you have a problem and you want to minimize a molecule in some pharmaceutical problem, there's a Hamiltonian energy mass equation for that. But then you have the energy of your device, right? Because it's a quantum device and there's a Hamiltonian for that. So it's like matching the Hamiltonian of your problem to the Hamiltonian of your device. And so it's called the unsance. It's one part of your Hamiltonian, and that's inside that equation. And there's many ways to put that unsance, whether it's like preferring a hardware or it's making it so the hardware matters less. But that's the match. That's where the unsance is it's being used in order to um, um, build the bridge between your algorithm, your problem, and your hardware. And then the programming languages are crazy chaotic, but there's people now who have a background in high performance computing that are trying to organize it now a little better. And then the use case themes that came out of this project a year ago was half were quantum chemistry, health, medical, and then a quarter were a bunch of constrained optimization, binary optimization. So vehicle routing, smart charging of EVs, scheduling your job employees, traveling salesman problem, the financial portfolio optimization problem. That's about one quarter at this time. And then about 15% were real simulation of physical systems. And then 10% was post-quantum cryptography. So that seems small. I'll bet it might be bigger now because people are more worried. They want to be ready for Q Day. And I'll bet that the 10% is higher now. Oops. Hello. Can you see my slides? Because my screen just went black. Hold on.
No.
So, yeah, I mean,
Okay, I'm back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, way back.
I only have 16 gigabytes of RAM, right? And so when I'm on a video thing for a while, my RAM starts filling up. So like after this talk, I'll have to like flush the RAM. But hopefully, we have another half hour or so. But I think we're okay. I can speed up a little bit too. So another thing you can do to ask your small company is give the community your favorite 5 research papers, because people like me who are trying to gather information and digest the information, we're buried in papers. We don't know where to begin. And so it's really helpful for companies to tell you, well, we love these and this gives us a lot, and maybe say why. And the company that does that a lot is Penny Lane. Penny Lane is brilliant. I think it's at least every 6 months they give their 5 favorite research papers. And usually I note that somewhere because it's really helpful to me. Another thing you can do is offer open source software in GitHub, for example. So here's another Orange Quantum example. They use Quantify. It's an open source Python-based data acquisition framework for quantum computing, solid state physics, and lots of other people are using it. There is even a research paper where a bunch of open source people put in their favorite open source algorithms and devices and everything. And I can find that easily if people are interested about this, because I think if you can do anything with open source, it's another vector into the community, and it's helped save a little bit of money for you too. It's not expensive, to be involved with this open source community. And here is a great ecosystem. It's small. It's based out of Munich. And this guy in his community around Munich has a toolkit of algorithms and benchmarks that is, I understand, very helpful and useful. And it's all open source, and he talks about it. And I think this became one part of, he spin off into a company recently. Okay, so that's open source. Now, If you want to engage the deep tech community, here's something you can do with your press releases. So you know what press releases look like that's catered towards like the managers. You know, they don't really want to read the research papers. They need the top level. But your deep tech community is huge, and they're your future users, and you want to engage them. And so if you can, as you provide a press release that's maybe towards the managers, think of a second one for the deep techers, or maybe have a link that says for, you know, deep tech, go here. Steve does that all the time when he writes his articles. So link to the paper, that's important. Explain how this advance compares to similar technology. Why should the public care? You know, so that's what the managers who are not in deep tech, they want to know that too. And then what's the advance? Boil down in 1 or 2 sentences, and AI can do that really helpful, easily for you. You address a couple of past problems, you know, why this is an advance, simply, and then provide a quality video that explains the advance. And Xanadu did this. and I was comparing Xanadu with some other companies that I was frustrated at, where I was looking for like some of these things. And Xanadu just did it always. So that's kind of my gold standard. Okay, communication stories, that's my niche. And you want them because they sell your product or service. It's not the other way around, where your products will sell the stories. Actually, your stories sell the products. And so I had a 2.5-month blitz writing for global quantum intelligence last fall. And in the 2.5 months, I wrote 50 stories, and it was a very aggressive publication schedule. So they were not polished stories. But my idea was I had to bridge their business intelligence to the community. And the way to do that was find the story nugget. And the story nugget turned out to be like the main thing every story to dig in. And I needed about 3 days usually to find that story nugget. And I would read hundreds of pages of white papers or research articles, just skimming to find like that little nugget. And then once you find the nugget, then the whole story unfolds. And so I have a LinkedIn article about finding those story nuggets. And I tried to go meta and see like, what was my brain thinking to find it? And I don't have like a standard approach that always worked, but I did have, first of all, I knew that AI tools won't find it. You have to read and read and read and read. And the goal is to keep the person on your page for 10 to 15 seconds. And if you could do that, then you've got their attention. And so I got my story nuggets from everywhere, not just one standard way. I saw videos, and they would, like, the podcast person would say something, so wow, that's really interesting. And if it got my curiosity, I knew that could get your curiosity. So I noted that. And then popular science videos, user group videos, patents. I love to read patents. I know that's weird, but I actually find stories in there. Google Earth, like I check out what China's doing, you know, and some of their new quantum companies, what they're building out there in Hefei. So I just get ideas everywhere. So that's the story nuggets. Now, something that may surprise the listeners here is that way back when, in the 50s and 60s, we had Fortran. And Fortran libraries became like the root of scientific computing for the next 40 years. And those Fortran libraries are still used today. You know, their legacy, and they're running climate models, and they're doing health models, and they're solving some aspects of cancer. I mean, they're still deeply inside our scientific community. So how can you use that today to build your quantum community? And I suggest that not exactly the algorithms, but the themes from way back when with those Fortran libraries are still valid today. And so that's what Fortran can help you with. And let's see, there we go. Yeah. And I wanted to show you this because this is a Fortran 66 printout, and it's from Brian May's PhD thesis. So I met him about the time that I finished my PhD. I was helping organize a planetary conference in the dust part because my PhD was on dust, cosmic dust. And Brian May's PhD was also on cosmic dust. And so I offered him like the conference proceedings in congratulations of his PhD, and we made contact and he gave me his PhD. And I saw in the back of his appendix, it's all Fortran 66. So he got started in the zodiacal light for his topic, and then he got the code running, and then he went off and founded Queen, and then, did that for decades. And then he went back around 2002, 3, and he finished his own PhD. And when you see the back of it, you see all his Fortran 66 code, and it's really cool. And so I want to show you that the numerical libraries, from way back then, are actually the themes that people are using for use cases today. So that's how Fortran can guide you today, is those themes. All right, and we're nearing the end, kind of, sort of, and that is if your user community is in fact broader, it's country-based, we know that there are quantum initiatives all over the world. And so here is a slide from Global Quantum Intelligence that lists all of that, and there's a lot of money there. So altogether, 58 billion US dollars worth, if you use those currency units, and at least 29 quantum initiatives for that. And what I did for fun was I wanted to know, based on the population, like, who are the powerhouses? If you know what the quantum initiative for that country amount of money is, and you know the population, how does that, per person look like? And it turns out UK is like the top. It's amazing. And Germany is not far behind. France is then half. Well, France and Netherlands are similar. Netherlands is between Germany and France. Israel is pretty big. It's way more of a powerhouse than I thought. I did not know this until I made that calculation. So Global Quantum Intelligence has a breakdown of a countrywide ecosystem that I think is useful to present to you. And I have articles at Quantum Computing Report, and I even archive them. So if you don't have a Quantum Computing Report account, probably my archive will help you access it. So talk to me. I have 50 articles that I archive that way. So the PESTEL system that GQI uses breaks down a ecosystem for a countrywide ecosystem in these different parameters. And they do a very good job. And it's true that UK is on top in almost all of these, except for environmental. But if you look at the policy arrangements, their economic drivers, how it serves the social environment, and that's where Vodafone, that talk also indicated how it's serving the community in all these social STEM education ways. And then the research is amazing in UK, but there's that parameter, environmental and legal. And this is what is an outcome of in the GQI and business intelligence system. And I have an example of UK here. So there's a heat map there where you see all of these PESTEL parameters in a heat map, and you can sort it, by the social, the environmental, the technology, like that. And what you find is that UK is either number 2 or number 3, in the world's ecosystem. United States is 1. Well, I don't know what to say any further. I want to show the Vodafone. Oops. There's a Vodafone slide that was shown on the 15th of April. So he showed this. And what I really like is that the UK, if you look at their strategy, how they're allocating the funds, it's remarkable. They and the amount of money they allocated is that they've have a strategy where they're looking at the key performance indicators, and then they prioritize all these pillars. They call it research, the ecosystem creation, the workforce development, infrastructure and supply chain, creating awareness, national security, cybersecurity, regulation, standardization. Sustainability is only one that's weak. And that also comes up in the pestle that GQI provided, is that they're not environmentally aware enough. You know, they can maybe talk with their sustainable community and you know, maybe build in some battery use cases or something like that. So I think we're almost done. The seeds of existing skill sets, I talked about how the quantum drones utilized that. If you can build an existing skill set on top of an existing skill set and build out your community. And I want to show this example that's very recent. So Lithuania, out of the 3 Baltic countries, is catching up to the other 3. Latvia is ahead a lot because there's some key scientists that, like more than 10 years ago were like really prominent in the community and very, you know, high level and well funded, and they drove quantum in the entire country, which, you know, is amazing, but we're a small country. And Estonia is more focused on networking, but they're really good in business. And Estonia is twice the size of Estonia, you know, in population size, but they haven't built that community yet. So what they did was they put together a group of people who went to Switzerland. They went to Basel and they had like these meetings with that community to see what they're doing. So if you can't, like, you know, write newsletters and use research and build that bridge, just go to another community and see what they're doing. And this is a brilliant way to grow your user community if you want to grow an ecosystem. And so that's what they did. And I think this is my last slide. No, almost. I don't know if I want to go through these examples, but I have 2. One is Xanadu Penny Lane as an excellent user community from this company. And I went through their LinkedIn posts, I went through their social media, and I tried to pull out all the different ways that they engaged and built their community. And then I got like how many followers in that. They have 9,000 LinkedIn followers. And so they have, I highlighted in green like the most important ones. They have an extensive cloud platform. They even have, you may have seen Penny Lane. They have like this graphic artist that uses these color themes, and they're really gorgeous to see. You know, it's a true artist who puts these together, and they have the videos and the all this material. You could lose yourself in the Penny Lane material, educational material. It's so well done. So it's one of my favorite platforms to learn any quantum topic is Penny Lane. And so then they have a forum blog. They have a local physical community involvement. They have extensive partnerships, like many memorandum of understanding. They have a monthly newsletter, an intern program. They put out those research papers or favorite research papers I was telling you about. Really good social media engagement. They have software on GitHub, many data sets offered at Penny Lane with all these different use cases. And they're very, like, probably the top ecosystem builders out of any company, I would say. They're not small though. I think there are maybe 100, maybe 150 employees. So it's not a small company, but you can learn from them, you know, what works, what they discovered works, and maybe pick and choose what you can afford if you're a small company that worked for them. The other one is Pascal, is a French company. And so they have, let's see how many, 40,000 LinkedIn followers. So bigger than Penny Lane. They use more of the Slack webinar, ask me anything. They have facts. They have a community involvement. I mean, in France. And France is strongly community oriented for quantum. They have open source software also. They give a lot of attention to use cases. They have one lesson where they're educating per week if you go to their online education program. And, you know, those are all the ways that I found when I was browsing all of their information. I guess that's it. And finally, I think this is my last slide. Gosh, we're over 90 slides already. In 2022, I decided, because Finland's close to me, I wanted to see how they're growing their ecosystem. And like Finland has Nokia and had Nokia, right? It's not, you know, it's still a hardware company, but they're not doing what they used to do. And the country built its you know, their STEM community on hardware, less on software. That's why IQM is so well supported there, is because it's a hardware company and Nokia with hardware. So I decided to build what's called a concept map. And it looks like a mind map, except that concept maps have little arrows that it has these like prepositions or these verbs, right? Prepositions and verbs that kind of connect more than what a mind map would do. So like I know from my Finnish friends about Nokia, because I have a Finnish friend who used to work at Nokia. He said, Amara, the whole country, you know, they've emphasized hardware. So I put that in Nokia experience, often six hardware. So that's in my concept map. And then I looked at the research groups, because there's a lot of quantum groups inside of the universities there, and like Aalto University and all that, software groups as well as hardware groups. And then I looked at the patents, and I could see that most of the patents in Finland are based around IQM, but VTT is huge, right? Why aren't there more patents? So there's like something there useful that you can understand about this countrywide ecosystem. I mean, why don't they have more quantum patents, for example? You can learn about that. Now, I did this 2 years ago, so probably I mean, Algorithmic is a very successful company that goes in here. I'll bet this whole concept map needs to be like updated in order for me to tell you useful things about Finland now. But this is from 2022. Excuse me. Water. So if you want to like map out your ecosystem, concept maps are a good tool. And that's it. That's it for my talk.
Thank you for watching this presentation, and thank you for being a valued member of our community.